Today we're going to be showing you how to fix or at least improve a slippery deck for a backward facing seat on a golf cart. Now this particular model is a Club Car DS, but this could really work for a back seat on any model golf cart. Now I had a serious concern here because the deck is quite slippery. It's like a painted metal surface here, and especially when it's wet, there's no traction. To fix this, we bought some grip tape similar to like a skateboard deck. We have a wet rag in order to clean off the deck. We have a dry rag in order to dry it off after the wet one. And then we have just a simple utility or box cutter knife. If you find this interesting, please subscribe to us and give us a follow. So what we're doing here is we're slicing off just the tape that holds it together. I took some measurements of the deck before I ordered on Amazon, so I was making sure that we had enough surface area on the deck on the sticker thing in order to cover the full area. You know, we took a length and a width. And as I unroll it here, I see that it's matching up pretty well, but you know, while I was unrolling, I did notice that the material is pretty stiff and you know, has a propensity to crack. So if you are doing this, then make sure that you are doing it very gently. Now, of course, the first step whenever you're adhering anything to a surface is you want to make sure that the surface is nice and clean, free of debris, free of dirt, to make sure that the sticky part is actually sticking and has longevity on the deck. Once I cleaned it with the wet rag, I've moved on at this point to using the dry rag. Obviously you could wait it out and just have the deck naturally dry, but for the purposes of this video and to speed things up, I just took the dry rag and cleaned off all of the moisture so that we could proceed on. Now this was a back seat and a deck that I did buy from Amazon, and of course the grip tape that we're about to use here also came from Amazon as well. So at this point, you know, it was pretty much showtime, and it was time to start sticking it down to the surface. So I found one end of it and I started to separate the backing paper from the sticky side in order for me to start unrolling it from one end to the other. Now, just like you saw earlier, this was a bit more of an ordeal because it did come very tightly wound, very tightly wrapped, and the material does have that propensity to separate. Alright, so here we go. This is separating the paper from the sticky surface. And, you know, I don't want to separate all of the paper at once. So I just separated a little bit of it and started aligning from one side of the deck. So on the closest side, you have to excuse my camera angle here, I started lining up the edge of the paper with the edge of the diamond surface, the main area that I wanted to have additional traction for any guests, you know, or family members that might be riding on the back. You know, my main concern here was making sure that the top was aligned, right? You know, we're gonna have to kind of trim a little bit of it to make sure that it sits flush and there's no extra overhang, extra material. But you know, as we unrolling it across from the right to left, we are just, you know, slowly separating the back paper and going a little bit at a time, and just taking our hands there, you know, from one end to the other to start smoothing down that surface. So by doing this little by little, it's a little easier to control the paper as you are laying it down. If you were to separate it all at once, it'd be kind of like a giant sticker sheet where you would have to make sure the alignment is straight and correct from the get-go, and then also have to, you know, smooth it perhaps from the middle outwards. Now, as I started doing this with my hand, I'm sure you'll notice that the deck is very grippy to the point of sandpaper. And I started sanding my hands down, so I went back and I got a glove to start protecting my hands because I didn't want it to be raw by the end of this. So now that I have protective glove, I just continue to smooth it from one end to the other, right? Just going little by little, separating the back paper and exposing the adhesive layer to ensure that there's no, bubbles, there's no air, there's no crinkles. As much as this is a DIY job, I wanted to make sure that it looked as professional as it could, without immediately giving away that this was, a backyard, hack job, essentially. Okay, so now that it is spread across the surface, or covering pretty much all of the deck, I continue to expose a little more surface area, but I was starting to run out to the end of the paper, which I totally anticipated. Like I mentioned earlier, we did get a measurement on the width, but this is when we started to think about cutting off the end, right? There was a little bit of excess material there, so what we did was we continued to press it down against the diamond plate surface, but there are seams where the diamond plate surface gives way to the bar below that it is welded to. So using a utility knife, and you'll want to be very careful with this, exercise all of your knife safety, I cut off the big portion so that I had a little easier time to work with for the corners, right? And essentially just kind of went very slowly. I gave it a couple of attempts here because I had really never cut this type of material before with a utility knife like this. So, at first I was concerned about it sanding down the sharp edge of the razor blade. But then I noticed that it was pretty tough, and obviously I have spare razor blades, so I'm really not concerned. The next thing that I attempted to do here was essentially start creating a bit of a perforation. And that would allow me to, not have to cut the entire surface and not have to mar up the painted metal surface underneath. But what I quickly realized is that when you have the perforation, the tear is not going to always go to plan. And the reason I say that is, as you'll see here in just a little bit, when I started to cut the perforations and when I started to tear along it, kind of like paper out of a spiral notebook, some of it came up in very small pieces, and that was a little bit frustrating. But you also had that ability, the paper has that ability to just kind of tear whichever direction it wants to go. So in certain areas, it actually tore back into the surface that had already stuck down to the diamond plate. And, rather than having it look like a dog kind of chewed up the edge there, I went back over the perforations with the knife with more steady pressure. Scratched paint surfaces be damned at this point. And this allowed me to finally get that rounded edge that I wanted to, for a little more of an OEM, from the factory type of look. Now, as you probably saw with the overall video here, this project took me all of about 10 minutes to do. A lot of it was, it took me a long time to do it because I never worked with the material before. I really didn't know what to anticipate. But also I bought this paper probably a couple months ago, and it was just too cold and unmotivated to go in the garage and actually do this. So now that the weather is finally good, it was a good time to bring the golf cart out, give it a cleaning, give it a good once over for the upcoming, summer, spring pool season, school pickup season, and then just knock this project out. All right, so I got the far edge in as good a quality as I really would care to have it. So now I'm just working on the near edge again. Then this is the side where we started the paper off. Once again, don't forget your knife etiquette, your knife safety, right? Make sure that your fingers are never in the way of the cutting surface. And, typically you want to make sure that you're cutting away from your body. So at this point I had cut all around the corners, and as you'll see now, back with my Crocs, it's a lot less of a slippery surface compared to earlier, right? So, obviously with a skateboard deck type of material, that is, it practically took my shoe off from the friction coefficient. So once again, thanks for watching this. Hope this helps you, especially if you have one of those slippery decks. And feel free to like this video, give me a comment if you try this, or subscribe if you are into some of these random videos that I continue to post here on the YouTube. See you next time.